Welcome to Shujin Academy VGM Club. I'm Professor Tom, your faculty sponsor. Today's opening track is This Connection is Secure from Secret Little Haven, an indie PC game/visual novel from Victoria Dominoski, who wrote all of the music for its soundtrack along with doing everything else for that game, because indie development is like that. Anyway, you should go buy Secret Little Haven on either itch.io or on Steam, because it's really great, especially if you've got some nostalgia for the internet of the late 90s, which I do. Because I did so much personal writing for my last episode, and because it took so long to put together, I decided that I would do something easier for this episode. We are thusly visited once again by rakish galactic scoundrel Rando Calrissian, who's brought us a grab bag of songs that don't have any particular unifying theme other than good VGM. To start things off, we'll hear from Funky KH himself, Katsuhiro Hayashi, and his soundtrack for the Super NES version of Motorcycle Racer Suzuka 8 Hours, a game based on a famous motorcycle endurance race held yearly at Japan's Suzuka Circuit, a racetrack you may recognize from its appearance in Pole Position 2 and several other video games. Hayashi has composed soundtracks for multiple racing games in his long and illustrious career. If you like this, check out his soundtrack for Road Spirits for the PC Engine CD. Suzuka 8 Hours was a Namco game, and for our second song, we'll have something from another Namco game, from the arcade this time. The game carries the rather generic title of Assault, and the song has the even more generic title of BGM1, but the super funky bass line is not generic at all. Assault was composed by the team of Kazuo Noguchi and a very young Shinji Hosoe. The song we'll be hearing is from Noguchi, whose career in the industry was nearly as brief as Hosoe's career has been long. Third up, there's going to be a jam from the bog when we hear Bog Jam from Vectorman 2 for the Sega Genesis, composed by John Holland. You may be surprised to hear that Vectorman 2 is the sequel to Vectorman 1, but you probably aren't. John Holland also composed Vectorman 1's soundtrack, and if any of the aborted attempts at Vectorman 3 had ever passed out of the prototype stage, he might have come back again. Breath of Fire 3 is the game that brings us song number 4 in the block, with Castle in the Sky from composers Yoshino Aoki and Akari Kaida. Like many other JRPG franchises, this game saw the Breath of Fire series make the jump from the Super NES to the Sony PlayStation because Japanese Prime Minister Morihiro Hosokawa banned cartridge-based RPGs in September of 1993 after a very public argument with Hiroshi Yamauchi, who was Nintendo's CEO at the time. Both Aoki and Kaida were early in their careers when they composed this soundtrack. They went on to work on several other Capcom games before moving on to freelance work, and Aoki eventually married fellow Capcom composer Tetsuya Shibata, who you may recognize from his work on the Monster Hunter games, or from his masterpiece, the soundtrack for Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
I wanna take you for a ride. I wanna take you for a ride.
This is a random episode, and song number 5 is from Tobal number 1 for the original PlayStation, and it's perhaps the most eclectic thing I'll be playing all day. It's called Electric Indian, and it's from the team of Hiroshi Hata and Kalta Otsuki, collectively known as Guido, and also VGM legend Yasunori Mitsuda. This song is all over the place, and it's a fun ride from 3 men who also put together the Chrono Trigger Brink of Time arranged album. The ending of the block sees us complete 4 lines at once, with Knighthood from Super Tetris 3 for the Super Famicom, the final game in the epic Super Tetris trilogy. Music for this game comes from Shigemitsu Goto, and this was apparently the first game he worked on before branching out into work composing for television and films in addition to VGM. He's also done a lot of sound effects work, notably on the Yakuza / Like a Dragon franchise. This song sounds like a traditional Russian folk song, assuming you come from a part of Russia where the folk songs are all JRPG battle themes. I don't actually think that part of Russia exists, but Russia is a big place, so who knows? Rando's betting all of his credits on these songs. Will they pay off? Those songs were Main Menu from Suzuka 8 Hours on the Super NES, BGM 1 from Assault, Scene 3 Bog Jam from Vectorman 2, Electrical Indian from Tobal No. 1, and finally Knighthood from Super Tetris 3. On previous episodes, I've mentioned that Iori Yagami is my favorite character from the King of Fighters franchise, and we'll be kicking off our second music block with Saxophone Under the Moon, the Yagami team theme from King of Fighters 14 for your PlayStation 4, Windows PC, and fancy arcade cabinets. When this game was first revealed, a lot of people thought that the graphics weren't up to snuff, and it did look kinda dated, although I thought it looked charmingly like a Dreamcast game. Apparently I was the only one. The composer here is Naoki Kita, and this is his first VGM credit. He's since continued to do a little other work for SNK. I always feel like arcade games don't get quite enough attention in the world of VGM, and that's because unlike console or PC games, arcade games were typically played in a very noisy environment where the music was drowned out or the cabinet's volume was turned down so low you couldn't hear it. And this is a shame, because there are a lot of good arcade soundtracks that have flown under everybody's radar. I'm doing my part to change that by playing several songs from arcade games in this episode, and for the second song in the second block, we'll hear from the second game in a series. The game is Rolling Thunder 2, and the song is View of Dynamism, Round 5, composed by Ayako Sasō, a game industry veteran who started her career in 1991 with this game, and also Final Lap 2, and who's still working in the industry today. Codename Viper is an NES game that's very similar to the Rolling Thunder games, so it just feels right that we'll play one of its songs after a Rolling Thunder track. The song is Area 01 and 02, and it's not 100% clear who composed it, although we're pretty sure that it was one of two women. Either it was Junko Tamiya, who did several excellent NES soundtracks for Capcom, or it was Yoko Shimomura, who's such a legend that I don't need to expound upon her musical prowess. But if you want to hear me expound upon her musical prowess, you can go back and listen to my 15th episode, which is a Yoko Shimomura deep dive. The fourth song in the block takes us to cult classic Neo Geo title Twinkle Star Sprites, which is an unusual overhead shooter. Instead of starring some sleek spaceships, or even helicopters, this is a shooter that stars some adorable magical anime characters, and in even more of a departure from the norms of its genre, it's actually a competitive game that's based around shooting enemies on your half of the screen to send them to your opponent's half of the screen, forcing them to dodge. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but it's fun as hell, and you can get it on the Switch, Steam, and also the Xbox One and Series X, but not the PlayStation for some reason. The composer here is Takao Oshima, who had a brief career with Neo Geo specialist developer ADK before leaving the industry. One of my favorite things in the whole world is crazy arcade cabinets that have specialized control schemes that are impossible to replicate on a home console. For example, Namco's 1995 Alpine Racer is a skiing game where you control things via a pair of ski foot pads that you stand on, swiveling yourself to move left and right. The novelty of the cabinet was joined with a game that was quite good, and it's got a soundtrack full of cool jams from a composer named Takayuki Ishikawa. Researching Ishikawa to prepare for this episode was interesting because there's a Takayuki Ishikawa who's done a lot of work on multiple Konami rhythm games like Dance Dance Revolution, but I think the Ishikawa who worked for Konami is a different person because that Ishikawa was born in 1975, and so he would have been 19 when Alpine Racer was released, which feels unlikely. The final song in the block comes from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project, which was the third of Konami's Ninja Turtles games for the NES. This game takes after the 1989 Ninja Turtles arcade game and its NES port, and it plays a lot like those games, but since it was designed for a home console, it's got a few enhancements that make it work better. Composers Yuichi Sakakura, Tomio Tomita, and Kozo Nakamura all turned in a soundtrack that's up to the stellar standards of Konami's NES output, and the song we'll hear is Scene 5-1, The Sewer Pipe Nightmare. Armed with just his wits and his trusty blaster, can Rando escape his precarious plight? Let's listen to some songs and find out. Those songs were Saxophone Under the Moon, Yagami Team BGM from King of Fighters 14, View of Dynamism, Round 5 from the arcade version of Rolling Thunder 2, Area 01 and 02 from Codename Viper, Love Me from the Neo Geo version of Twinkle Star Sprites, Invisible Destination from Alpine Racer, and finally Scene 5-1, The Sewer Pipe Nightmare from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project. It's time for a word from our sponsor.
A powerful appeal, a taste that is unreal. It's 45. Colt's 45. It's 45. It works every time. Oh, Colt's 45.
Take your game to the next level with new Colt 45 Energy. It's the first energy drink with the power of Colt 45. Start your buzz with 15% alcohol and keep it up all night with taurine, gary, ginseng, caffeine, and amphetamines. Plus electrolytes. Run through walls, fight your friends. New Colt 45 Energy. It works every time.
It works every time. Oh, Colt 45.
Now back to the show. Our third block starts off with Not All There, Area 1, from Viewpoint, composed by Sizzla Okamura. This is a really cool soundtrack with a lot of New Jack Swing influences, and I'd like to shout out my VG podcast bro Rage Cage from the sadly defunct VG Emporium for introducing me to it. The version of the song we'll be hearing is from the original Neo Geo version of Viewpoint, and not one of its subsequent ports to the Genesis, FM Towns, X68K, or the PlayStation. The second song takes us to the glorious world of consumerist excess with Shopping from Ys 5, Lost Kefin, Kingdom of Sand for the Super Famicom, composed by the Falcom sound team of Mieko Ishikawa, Naoki Kaneda, Satoshi Arai, Atsushi Shirakawa, and Masaru Nakajima. Ys 5 is an outlier in the series in that it only received contemporary release for the Super Famicom. Other games in the series generally saw release on a bunch of platforms at once. This block wound up with a few songs from JRPGs, because the third song in the third block is Battle Theme 1 from Unlimited Saga for the PlayStation 2, composed by the Masashi Hamauzu. I've never actually sat down and played one of the Saga games, although I really like the soundtracks. I think it's because I've always heard that they're spiritual descendants of Final Fantasy II, a game with a lot of mechanics that I did not particularly enjoy, even if I did find some of them interesting. Going from one legendary composer to another, song Roman numeral IV in the block is from Tim Follin, one of Europe's VGM greats. The song is Stage 4 from Sky Shark on the NES, and although this is a port of an arcade game, Follin pretty much ignored the original soundtrack and went his own way, as he was frequently wont to do. He did this soundtrack pretty early in his career, at the ripe old age of 18, but even as a wee lad, he was putting out some magical stuff. Heading back to arcade games, because they're cool, the fifth song in the block is Fly Away from Night Striker, a frantic cyberpunk rail shooter starring a hovercraft. The composer here is Masahiko Takaki, a member of Taito's Zuntata house band, who also did the music for Warrior Blade, another crazy arcade game that begs to be seen. As a company, Taito has a really interesting history. It was founded by a Ukrainian Jewish refugee in China near the end of World War II, before moving to Japan in 1950, where they imported vodka and then branched out into vending machines and jukeboxes, which led them to start making electromechanical games in the 1960s, which led them to start making video games in the 1970s. I enjoy doing research for this show because it leads me down some fascinating rabbit holes. Moving back to the NES after our historical digression, we'll be hearing Area B from Shatterhand, composed by Iku Mizutani, who's notable for doing several soundtracks for Natsumi in the 8-bit era. In the North American market, this was a game about a radical cop with sunglasses and cybernetic arms. But in Japan, the game was a licensed title based on Super Rescue Soulbrain, a tokusatsu TV show a la Kamen Rider and Power Rangers. And finally, we'll close things out with the exceptionally groovy Risky Mission from Growlancer 3, The Dual Darkness for the PlayStation 2, composed by Hiroshi Fujioka. He doesn't have a ton of credits. Most of his work has been done on B-list JRPGs like Landgrisser 3 and Warsong, along with a couple of adult game soundtracks. He's also credited as doing Cube on the original Lunar for the Sega CD. I have no idea what Cube actually entailed, but it may have involved music composition or arrangement duties, as he did it alongside Noriyuki Iwadare. Things look pretty bad for Rando. Let's see if he can find a way to get the girl and save the galaxy.
1, 2, 3, 4, hit!
Those songs were Not All There, Area 1 from the Neo Geo version of Viewpoint, Shopping from Ys 5, Lost Kefin, Kingdom of Sand, Battle Theme 1 from Unlimited Saga, Stage 4 from the NES version of Sky Shark, Fly Away from Night Striker, Area B from Shatterhand, and finally, Risky Mission from Grow Lancer 3, The Dual Darkness. That's the show. Rando Calrissian will return in Rando Calrissian and the Sinister Secret of the Silver Shadow, so look for that one, coming someday when I feel like doing another Grab Bag episode. If you want to reach me, I'm most active on Blue Sky as shujinacademy.bsky.social. You can also find me on Threads, Facebook, and Instagram as Shujin Academy VGM Club. Episodes of the show are posted to my YouTube channel, which you can find by searching for Shujin Academy VGM Club. Other links are on my Linktree at linktr.ee/Shujin Academy. Please leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're finding this episode. New episodes are released once or twice a month, depending on how often I get them done, and they premiere on Thursday mornings on your favorite podcatcher and on 8beats.co, the internet's #1 game music radio station. My show is also featured on TerraPlayer, the cool app that's a destination for gaming podcasts and other content, so you can check me out there. Finally, if you just can't get enough of me, I'm also voicing esports reporter Samson Escapades on audio drama podcast How Much in Bison Dollars, which you can find on FGC Radio, Patreon, and most podcatchers. If you're listening on Spotify, please be aware that they've pulled a few of my episodes before. There's a non-zero chance that they'll eventually pull my entire podcast, as they've done with a few other game music podcasts, so I strongly suggest you subscribe elsewhere to be sure you can get all the Professor Tom goodness you crave. Special thanks for this episode goes out to fellow VGM podcaster Jameson of Bar Silence Podcast for contributing cover art. You can and should find Bar Silence wherever you download podcasts, and check out his website at barsilence.com. Also, thanks goes out to Captain Supreme for providing the voice of Colt 45 Energy. You can find him on Blue Sky at Captain Supreme, or on his Linktree at linktr.ee/Captain Supreme. Also, thanks to Internet Comic Penny Arcade for coming up with the name Rando Calrissian, which I have shamelessly stolen. And finally, a word of appreciation for all the fine, hardworking people who've ripped these tracks out of various video games. I literally couldn't do the show without you. I've got one more song to play us out, and it's a bit of a departure from the norm. I generally don't play unofficial arranged tracks. I leave that to Martyrus over at fellow VGM podcast REVGM, where it is his stock in trade. But I'm making an exception for this one, which is called Live Mega, Live Moss, a version of Megalomania from Yoko Shimomura's soundtrack for Live Alive. This interpretation of the song was headed up by Alejandro Espinosa, and it was performed by the OC Jazz Collective for the Mode 7 Jazz tribute to the SNES album, and it's a really fun version of an iconic song. Thanks for listening. I'm Professor Tom, and I'll see you next time on Shujin Academy VGM Club.